As a hairstylist, are you wondering how much you should be making in a week? If you're commission and you're wondering if I go independent, what will my monthly or even yearly income look like? I'm here to share all my secrets. I'm going to be open and vulnerable, and I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I was making in a week, a month, a year when I was a hairstylist working behind the chair. I want that you guys to use this to gauge whether it's time to go independent, whether you might should be making more, or whether you're ahead of the game. Now, these numbers are my numbers. I'm not saying that every hairstylist should make this, can make this. I'm not saying that you're not making a lot more. And if you are, please reach out. We all want to know your secrets. There's room for all of us. But here are some of the things I did as a hairstylist to make around $250,000 a year working 32 hours per week. As a independent contractor and an owner of a hair salon, I treated myself like a booth renter. So just like you guys, I bought my supplies from a separate LLC. I paid booth rent just like you guys and owned the salon completely separately as myself as a hairstylist. So I basically had two business entities, Irvine as a hairstylist and bex+Co Salon, and the finances were kept completely separate. And the reason I did this is because the only way I can coach you to earn money is if I am doing the exact same things you're doing as a stylist. So everything I do in my career has been an experiment to teach you guys how to do better, make changes, or to show you guys what not to do. I've done a lot of that as well. So let's get down to it. And I just want to break down the numbers and the math. As a hairstylist, I am a hustler. I love to double book. I know that is not for everybody, but I always had at least two clients at a time, and I worked with a full-time assistant. And I want to break down the numbers of having a full-time assistant as well, because it does kind of change the way that this looks. So, as a hairstylist, I worked 32 hours per week. That was 8 hours per day, 4 days a week. Later on, once I got pregnant and had my baby, I switched down to 3 days a week. But I want to talk about 2019, which was my last year working behind the chair. And once we come to this number, I'm going to give you the number that I made in 2019. And then I'm going to add 10% to it to kind of bring it up to today's standards with inflation. Take that with a grain of salt. It's just numbers I made up. So it's just kind of a guess. It's not something I researched or factual or talked to a financial advisor. It's literally just kind of a guess on what I would be doing today if I was still working the exact same way. So on average, I averaged $200 an hour when I worked behind the chair working on two guests at once. And I did that 8 hours a day. So that was $1,600 a day. What that looks like per week is $6,400 a week. Now, it's important to realize there are expenses involved. So take that 6,400 and we subtract $325 dollars for rent, which is what I paid in rent, much like a lot of you. I averaged about $250 in color. When we raise inflation, this rate will also raise about 10%. So you might be paying a little bit more than that. Keep in mind, this was 2019 and things have changed a lot, but the numbers should kind of add up to match inflation because as I add that 10% onto the final number, it's also going to add 10% to rent and 10% to expenses. And then I would put away 20% of my total gross income for taxes. The reason I did this, technically, you're probably paying more like 25% of your profit, but I knew that I would have expenses. And so without calculating those expenses, I just put 20% of my total income away. And I actually always came out ahead every year once I took out my expenses. So I've never had a year where I just didn't have enough saved for taxes, taking out 20% of all of the money I made. And I did it on a weekly basis. So at the end of the week, when I made 6,400, I would come in and I would take 20% out. I would put it in a tax account and that money was untouchable. It wasn't an emergency fund. It wasn't a, oh my gosh, I can't pay rent or whatever fund. It was literally untouchable money because paying the IRS is going to be your number one. I even say pay the IRS before you buy supplies or pay rent. It sounds crazy, but you have to pay your tax. So let's look at these numbers on a bigger scale. Whenever you do the calculations of 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, 52 days in a year, I came out to making, after the subtraction of rent, color, and taxes, $236,340 per year. Now, this is after all expenses. This is after taxes are paid. This is what I put in my pocket. And I mean, just to break that down for you so that you can see that by week, if you divide that by 52 weeks in a year, every week I made $4,545 after taxes, after expenses. So if I mean, that's a big number. Now, I want to be fair and say I've been doing hair for 20 years and I'm really good at marketing and I had a huge client base when I got started. So it might not be reasonable to say that you're going to make $200 an hour. But even at $100 an hour, which is so reasonable, even for new stylists, you should really at least try to make $100 per hour. You know, that's going to put you in the 2,250 per week range, which is still going to put you at 10,000 a month and 120,000 a year, which is after taxes and expenses. This is literally what you take home and get to live off of each month. Besides, of course, what you decide to save for retirement or invest in your business, which I totally suggest that you do, but this is like your money. I think it's important that we talk about these numbers, that we look about these numbers, and that we do these calculations to find one, what we could be making, and two, what we can set our goals to make. So again, I'm going to tell you guys how I recommend doing this. So I would, if you're a commissioned stylist, I would look at your books now and see what you're averaging per day. Look at your daily rate and look at it for 30 days and find the average. Now take that daily average, right? And you're going to multiply it by the number of days you're working per week. Once you get that number, whatever your number of days you're working per week times what you're making in a day, multiply that times 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. And that's going to be what you're making in a year before expenses and before taxes. Now, if you want to get even more nitty gritty, take that number, which is your, for example, me, $1,600 a day times 4 days a week. Subtract your rent, which for me was $325. Subtract your color expenses, which for me was $250, and subtract 20% for taxes. Now take that number and multiply it times 52. That number is your yearly number after taxes, after expenses, and after rent. And this is a good way to gauge whether you're going to be able to make more, or if you want to set a goal of, okay, I'm making $100 an hour, but I really want to make $150 an hour, and multiply that so you can see what that looks like per year. It is huge. It is huge. And I want to talk about something really cool in our industry. And I say this all the time. We are one of the few industries where you can literally give yourself a $50 an hour raise by just making a few changes, like raising your price or working two clients in at once or utilizing an assistant if that's what you need to do. What other industry, if you're working in corporate America, who's going to give you a $50 an hour raise? I mean, that's crazy. In fact, a lot of the jobs I was working whenever I worked for somebody else, and this was a lot of years ago, and it was jobs like retail, but I was thrilled to get a dollar raise. Like if I was making $15 an hour and I got a dollar more per hour, that was a big deal. So we work in an industry where we have access to instant cash if you're independent. That money hits your bank account the very next day. You can make more by working more. You can make more by raising your prices. I mean, it's unlimited if you're in a bind how you can come up with money. And I always, always, always want to preach that. And that's why I wanted to break down these numbers for you, is to show you how easy it is to make more money when you need it, when you're feeling panicked. I mean, find a way to go in the salon and do somebody's hair, squeeze somebody in. I know that that's not ideal. I know that goes against boundaries, but if you're in a bind and you can get an extra person in and make an extra $100 an hour, $200 an hour, add upgrade, add a keratin treatment, add a scalp massage, whatever it looks like to you to increase your hourly income, do it, because it's going to really increase your earnings per year. And it's going to give you a lot of flexibility to invest and to have freedom in your life. I know money isn't everything, but money equals freedom, y'all. It gives you freedom. And that's why I want you to really focus on these numbers and figure out how much you should make in a week. Now, one thing I want to bring up is I worked with an assistant. So my assistant, of course, she was part-time. I didn't have her all the time, but she was paid $30,000 a year. So, if I was making 236, but I really wanted to utilize that assistant, of course, that lowers my hourly and it lowers my yearly. But for me, that was totally worth it. So I could bring my monthly or my yearly income down to 206, work with an assistant almost full time, 30 hours a week, have them do the stuff I didn't want to do, check out clients, shampoo hair, do toners, blow dry, help me clean up. And it was huge for job satisfaction. So if we really incorporate inflation at like a 10% rate, if I say that I was making 200 in 2019, really that might look more like 220 or 230 today. And again, I was working a pretty easy 32 hours a week, 4 days a week. So I did have years where I really pushed the boundaries and I made up to 285,000 after taxes. And I think I actually did that in 2018, 285,000 after taxes, after expenses. But for me, that extra money, while it was so wonderful to have, I preferred having freedom of time and freedom of purpose where I could spend my time doing things that were a little bit more important to me and pursue hobbies. So I was willing to make a little bit less, 200. And now, I mean, 280 now would be more like 300 plus. And I did that as a hairstylist. That doesn't even include my income from owning the salons. So I just really want you guys to know, no matter where you start right now, just set a year-long goal. I mean, what you're doing today is going to really impact what your year looks like next year. So set these goals really just $5 at a time. Try to increase your hourly, whatever that looks like. Make $5 more per hour, work a little bit faster, have add-ons, raise your prices, whatever you need to do, but that also fits in with your business and doesn't compromise your client's experience or cause you to lose clients because you're raising prices too rapidly. But whatever that looks like, there are ways to do it. And eventually you are going to make a third more income. You're going to go from making 100 to 150 just by making those small changes that don't necessarily require more of your time. So it was really important to me to be vulnerable and transparent and tell you guys exactly how much I made in some of my best years and really encourage you guys to look at those numbers, look at what other stylists are doing and know that that's possible for you. And if you're in commission, really start evaluating what you're making per day and how much of that you are giving away. Because in the end, your expenses are probably a lot less than 50+% that you're giving to the salon owner. And especially if you're doing your own marketing and bringing in your own clients. If you love commission, please stick with it. I know a lot of commission salons that are doing amazing things, have great education, have great opportunities, are paying fair wages, and are really taking the stress out of work, but it's not all of them. So if you're in a salon where you're unhappy, you have a desire to make more, you want to be your own boss, do these numbers, look at them, do these calculations, and see if it is time to go out on your own. Thanks for joining into Glam Chats. Please like and subscribe. I love to know that you guys are watching and are here with me and listening to what I have to say. If you ever have a topic you want me to go over, I'm so happy to talk about that topic. Or if I don't know the answers, I'm happy to ask for help from someone who does and get you those answers. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I will talk to you next week. Look forward to hearing about how much you guys are able to raise your income between now and January 1st. Have a great week. Bye.